My name is Anthony Moya, and I am here to inform the audience about why marijuana testing in the workplace should either be dropped completely or at least be more lenient. So let's start off with this scenario. We have two highly respected teachers, Derek and Stuart. After a long, hard day's work, both come home to relax. Stuart cracks open a cold one and gets to drinking. On the other hand, Derek lights up a joint, and that's how he relaxes. Both show up to work the next day and find out that they have a drug test to take. Now, Derek is worried that he might lose his job, all because of the fact that he smoked a joint after work. Stuart, on the other hand, has no worry and knows that he will not get fired because he drank alcohol the night before. Now, if marijuana is used responsibly, I believe that it should not be discriminated against. In fact, marijuana is used in the same way as alcohol. We use it at a social gathering, hanging out with friends, or just to relax after a long, hard day. If we don't discriminate people for being alcoholics after work, why should marijuana be any different? Now, time and time again, marijuana has been proven to be safer than alcohol. Marijuana does not cause hangovers the next day. It does not cause mental fogginess the next day or irritability the next day, just as alcohol does. Now, according to a study done by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, more than 30,000 annual deaths are contributed by the health effects of alcohol. The CDC doesn't even have a category of deaths for marijuana. And, in fact, alcohol has been proven to increase risk-taking behavior. And some studies have shown that marijuana actually decreases risk-taking behavior. Now, I'm not here to say that marijuana doesn't have any negative health impacts, but then again, what substance doesn't? And many states are starting to realize that marijuana is not as dangerous as it has been made out to be. And more states are starting to take positive steps in this direction. According to a survey published in 2016 by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services, about 24 million Americans aged 12 and older are current users of marijuana. Now, this is bad news for CEOs and companies alike, because that means that positive tests of marijuana are increasing. In fact, there has been an increase about 71% in states where it is legalized since 2010. Now, this is bad news because more companies are starting to realize that the margin for THC-free workers is starting to dwindle. Now, worry about use in the workplace can come up as an issue, but I believe that this just comes down to trust and morality by the employee. If an employee knows the risk of using marijuana in the workplace, then he's just not fit for that job anyway. And there are physical cues of somebody being under the influence of marijuana. This includes, but not as limited to, marijuana on the breath and the clothes, bloodshot and glossed over eyes, mental fogginess and slowness, and there's many more physical cues that an employer can tell if his employee is under the influence of marijuana. Now, many more states are starting to legalize medicinal use of marijuana, and this can cause a whole slew of problems for employers looking for future employees. So, in states where marijuana is legalized, should we discriminate against people who are prescribed medical marijuana to treat an illness? That creates a tough situation for the employer. We can also take the situation where somebody travels to a state where it is legalized on vacation, let's say, and comes back and fails the drug test. Should they be discriminated against even though they went to a state where it was legal for them to smoke marijuana? Let's also take this other scenario into consideration. What if somebody just uses marijuana to treat a condition and they do not use in the workplace? Should they be fired because they failed a drug test even though they're just using it to treat a medical condition? This can create a whole bunch of problems. Now, in marijuana, there are these things called cannabinoids. CBD is one of those cannabinoids, and it is responsible for most of the medicinal effects of marijuana. While on the other hand, THC is responsible for the psychoactive effects of getting high. So, what if somebody is smoking marijuana that is high in CBD but has a low percentage of THC? Well, they can still come up positive on a drug test. Should they be fired because they were just using it to treat a medical condition and they accidentally ingested some THC? I believe it just comes down to trust by the employer and by the employee. The employee needs to recognize that he needs to use marijuana responsibly as a mature adult, and the employer needs to trust the employee that he is not using in the workplace. Now, all the new marijuana laws, especially in states where it's legal, is creating a bunch of headaches for a company. You have to take into consideration all of the varying aspects of marijuana use. And I believe that all of the headaches and the worry and the stress can be solved if we drop marijuana testing as a whole, or at least be more lenient and understanding about it. Now, I realize that marijuana is highly controversial, and there are two very different sides to this. But I believe that we as a whole need to realize that marijuana is not as dangerous as it has been made out to be, and it can actually help people with certain conditions. And I also believe that many people are mature and responsible enough to not use in the workplace. Now, alcohol, if used responsibly, is not discriminated against. We don't look at it as a bad thing if used responsibly. And I believe this is the same as with marijuana. If we use it responsibly as mature adults, I believe we should not be fired for it if we test positive in the workplace. Now, we see alcohol has disastrous effects, and we see this every day, but yet employers do not have a problem with it. And I believe that it should be the same way with marijuana. After all the articles I have read and all the research I have done, I believe that I am trustworthy enough to speak about this subject, and I hope that I have pointed out some useful information for the audience to use, as for us being the next generation of work is coming up into the workplace, I believe that this will affect us firsthand. And marijuana might become legalized in the near future. And if we want to experiment with it or use it, I believe that we must be informed, and there needs to be some reform about marijuana testing in the workplace.